The epic is a long narrative poem recounting heroic deeds, although the term has also been loosely used to describe novels such as Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace and motion pictures such as Yerhi Einstein's Ivan the Terrible. In literary usage, the term encompasses both oral and written compositions. The prime examples of the oral epic are Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. The epopee is a subgenre of the epic. Epopees are epic poetry, therefore they are in verse, they have cadence and rhythm. There were ancient methods for telling stories about their heroes. The epopees embodied the values of the corresponding culture. There is intervention of supernatural beings such as gods. It tells the stories, actions, and adventures of a hero who is attempting to perform a difficult task. Some examples of heroes in other epopees can be Achilles, Odysseus, Aeneas, and Dante. Medieval music is songs and pieces from an era of Western music, including liturgical music for the church and secular music, non-religious music. Medieval music includes solely vocal music such as Gregorian chant and choral music, that is, music for a group of singers, solely instrumental music, and music that uses both voices and instruments. This era begins with the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century and ends sometime in the early 15th century. Renaissance literature is characterized by a tendency toward humanist or non-religious topics. The period as a whole marked a dramatic shift away from strict adherence to church doctrines, and much of the literature of the era, such as Shakespeare's Hamlet, depicts secular philosophical struggles with topics such as individuality, death, and morality. The Spanish Golden Age is a period of Spanish literature extending from the early 16th century to the late 17th century, generally considered the high point in Spain's literary history. Its literature is characterized by patriotic and religious fervor, heightened realism, and new interest in earlier epics and ballads, together with the somewhat less pronounced influences of humanism and Neoplatonism. The most important authors from these topics are from the epic genre, the Homer, and the most important work is the Iliad and the Odyssey. From the epopee we have Vyasa, and the most important work is the Mahabharata. From the songs in the Middle Age we have the unknown author, but the most important work is the Cantar of Miosid. From the Renaissance we have Shakespeare, and the most important work is Hamlet. And from the Spanish Golden Age we have Miguel de Cervantes, and the most important work is the Quixote. The Iliad. Nearly 3,000 years after they were composed, the Iliad and the Odyssey remain two of the most celebrated and widely read stories ever told. Yet next to nothing is known about their composer. He was certainly an accomplished Greek bard, and he probably lived in the late 8th and early 7th centuries BC. Authorship is traditionally ascribed to a blind poet named Homer, and it is under this name that the works are still published. The enormous narrative kernel of the Mahabharata tells the story of two sets of paternal first cousins, the 5 sons of the Decapit King Pandu, and the 100 sons of blind King Dhritarashtra, who became bitter rivals and opposed each other in war for possessions of the ancestral Bharat kingdom with its capital in the city of the elephant. The Cantar del Music is the oldest Spanish epic poem preserved. It's based on the true story of Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, known as El Cid, and it takes place during the Spanish Reconquest. It is the first known extensive narrative work of the Spanish literature written in a Romance language, and it was composed around 1200. Don Quixote is a middle-aged gentleman from the region of La Mancha in central Spain, obsessed with the chivalrous ideals taught in books he has read. He decides to take up his lance and swear to defend the helpless and destroy the weak. After a first failed adventure, he sets out on a second one with a somewhat befuddled laborer named Sancho Panza. Hamlet. On a dark winter night, a ghost walks the ramparts of Elsinore Castle in Denmark, discovered first by a pair of watchmen, then by the scholar Horatio. The ghost resembles the recently deceased King Hamlet, whose brother Claudius has inherited the throne and married the king's widow, Queen Gertrude. Shakespeare wrote this play with a few facts from real Scottish history. His troupe of actors, the Kingsmen, performed for their patron King James of Scotland, who is honored in the scene with the 8 kings followed by Banquo's ghost. His intention in writing Macbeth was to entertain his audience and to tip his hat to his benefactor King James at the same time. The main theme of Macbeth is the destruction wrought when ambition goes unchecked by moral constraints. Finds its most powerful expression in the play's 2 main characters. Macbeth is a courageous Scottish general who is not usually inclined to commit evil deeds, yet he deeply desires power and advancement. The type of narrator of Macbeth is omniscient because the point of view of William Shakespeare is for the audience, third-person objective. The viewers are outside observers of the story. The audience does get through Shakespeare's use of soliloquies and aside glimmers of Macbeth's thoughts, but viewers can technically only perceive external actions and a speech, not interiority. The main character is Macbeth, who is a Scottish general and the Thane of Glamis, who is led to weak thoughts by the prophecies of the 3 witches. The secondary character is Macbeth's wife, a deeply ambitious woman who lusts for power and position. Early in the play, she seems to be stronger and more ruthless of the 2, as she urges her husband to kill Duncan and seize the crown. The dynamic characters are the 3 witches. The play begins with the brief appearance of the trio witches and then moves to a military camp where the Scottish King Duncan hears the news that his generals Macbeth and Banquo have defeated 2 separate invading armies. The playing character is Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft, who helps the 3 witches work their mischief on Macbeth. And finally, the static characters are Lennox and Ross, who are Scottish noblemen, and technically they don't have a lot of importance in the novel.